Hello, my name is Bastion Gonzalez, and today we will be discussing Chapter 5, The Greeks and the Wider World. Dark Age in Aegean Life. The Aegean people had lived in an area that had difficult geography. They were surrounded by mountains, which led to problematic travel. Their land was not proper for agriculture, and they were not able to use an irrigation system for water. Due to the fact that they lived in an inhabitable environment, they depended on migration between the islands and the mainland of Greece. Along with the new lifestyle of migration, their previous culture had vanished. Since they were dependent on migrating constantly as a means for survival, writing and artistic production dropped. The people who once lived in large settlements were now living in smaller, less fortunate groups of farmers and herders. The only type of culture that lived through the Dark Ages was their pottery. The Aegean people produced a type of pottery called geometric pottery. Although they had lived difficult lives, their pottery is what held them together. Greek colonization. Around 800 BCE, the Aegean people discarded the rural lifestyle and instead had a boost of demographic growth, internal and external factors, and better contact with the East, which led to radical social changes. This time in Greek history was known as the Archaic period. For 2 centuries, the Greek people had stopped living in small communities and joined with other small groups to establish large settlements. They moved away from their homelands to where there was fertile land for agricultural means. While the Greeks were developing their civilization eastward, the Phoenicians had already colonized the western Mediterranean. The Phoenicians and the Greeks used their influence and culture to blend their civilizations. Also, the Greeks used trading as a means to get what they needed while they had used the fine wines and olive oil as an exchange. But their most popular trading item was their pottery, the one piece of culture that lived through the Aegean Dark Age. By using its trading ports and its unique offerings, the Greek culture spread from east to west, while they took in some of the other cultures they experienced. Growth of the polis. As the settlements continued to grow, they began to form city-states. The Greeks had called them polis. Although they had been city-states previously, the difference between them and the polis was the fact that it was a self-governing city-state. The citizens themselves ran the internal government, but were sometimes a part of a larger political unit. Although citizens did share power, not everyone in the polis was a citizen. Only native-born, male landowners were able to participate in politics, while women and slaves and foreigners were excluded. Since there were scarce resources, city-states competed against each other frequently. Therefore, an important responsibility of a citizen was to fight in the army. This developed new war strategies and techniques. Soldiers formed phalanxes when fighting. These were tightly organized groups that relied on everyone's cooperation, holding a shield in one hand and a spear in the other. This tight bond of cooperation was originated in the sense of community within the polis. The people fought hard and well because they were doing so for their city-states. Previously, people had mostly experienced a tyrant ruler. With the growth of the polis came new types of government. The two types of government that city-states used were an oligarchy or a democracy. An oligarchy was the most common and consisted of a small group of men who were usually wealthy. Given that mostly landowners had the wealth, they had the most power. But others used a democratic approach, where more people have a say in what is done. Democracy had flourished in one city-state, which is known as Athens. Athens versus Sparta. Athens and Sparta are two prime examples of how geographical diversity can shape political rule in a city-state. Athens was a city-state that lived near the coast. Since it lived near the water, trade was the most important factor for Athens. It had acquired most of its wealth through trade and was also a popular place to experience a variety of culture from the merchants across the globe. With this wealth, they expanded their land and caused small landowners to be indebted to wealthy city dwellers. This caused tension between the rich and the poor, which led to the birth of democracy. Athenian democracy was a system that followed one basic principle. All the citizens should be able to participate in government. But the Athenian people developed a way to ensure too much power wasn't given to a group, through a limited amount of ruling time. Sparta was a city-state that depended on the surrounding fertile land which they conquered. The Spartan citizens, which were only men, used the inhabitants of these conquered lands to farm them for their own gain while they were either working with the council or preparing for war. Sparta had followed an oligarch approach to government. Usually the wealthy families had more influence towards the officials. Sparta was also known for its army. It had used its army to gain much land, which is why it is ultimately known for its exploitation of nearby land and population. While these two city-states flourished in their own ways, they will soon come to conflict with each other. Persian Wars. While democracy and oligarchy was flourishing in the West, rule by a king was still a prominent factor in Southwest Asia. This is shown in the Persian Empire. The Persians were conquering westward and considered the Greek city-states to be an easy challenge. Their first attempt of invading was in 490 BCE. The Athenians were able to defend their homeland at the Battle of Marathon. Using their heavy armor and phalanxes, they were able to outmaneuver the Persians. The invasion stopped at that battle, causing the Persians to flee back to their homeland. A decade later, King Xerxes rounds up an estimated 2 million soldiers to reconquer the Greek city-states. The Spartan army had sacrificed itself at the Battle of Thermopylae. At this battle, 300 Spartan soldiers under King Leonidas fought to the death to stall the Persian invasion. Although they got through, it was enough time to evacuate the remaining people. Even though most of Sparta and Athens was burned down, Athens kept fighting at sea. At the Battle of Salamis, the Athenians were able to lure the Persians into a narrow bay, which they then used their smaller ships to defeat the Persian navy. Having many casualties, the Persians fled before their whole army was sunken into the Aegean Sea. Peloponnesians versus Delians. After the Persian Wars, Sparta and Athens were praised for their contributions to the Greek city-states. Through their new fame, they had acquired new allies, by free will or by force. The two city-states formed two leagues. The Spartans had taken control of most of inland city-states, and had sufficient infantry but lacked ships. Since they inhabited most of the Peloponnesian area, they were known as the Peloponnesian League. Meanwhile, Athens allied with states on the Greek islands and the Ionian coast. They created the Delian League, named after Delos, which is where their treasury was kept. As it had continued to grow, Athens had acquired the largest navy in that region. The Delians were known for protecting the rights of democracy and went against the oligarchical regimes of the Peloponnesian League. As the two leagues grew in power, conflict rose between the two. This led to the Peloponnesian War. Athens was declaring a lot from its members and doing so with excessive force. Because of this, Sparta was able to be in power for a short period of time. Macedonians from the north took the opportunity of the crumbling Greek city-states and conquered the southern lands under King Philip II, using similar war tactics as the Greeks used. After this war, the Greek polis does not exist. Hellenistic empires. Alexander, son of King Philip, had succeeded his father in 336 BCE. His first course of action was to battle the Persian Empire, which had ruled a vast amount of land for over 200 years. After a quick succession of battles, Alexander was now the ruler of all the Persian Empire's land. Since he ruled so much land, he expanded his army to every corner of his territory. After some time, his troops rebelled and he then settles in Babylon. He later died in 323 BCE, leaving no heir to his kingdom. All of his generals fought over who should take control of what. This created two separate kingdoms, the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic Empire. To establish a line of royalty, unlike Alexander the Great, the rulers married local women and started dynasties of mixed descent. As the Greeks adapted to the empire lifestyle, the interaction with people of other places was limited. Although the Greek polis was still around, it was usually ruled by a king. These two empires consisted of culture of all the lands Alexander conquered. This included Greek culture, Egyptian culture, Middle Eastern culture, and some Asian culture. Three important forms of culture in the Hellenistic empires were scholarship, philosophy, and religion. Scholarship had revolved around the Library of Alexandria in Egypt. Many scholars flocked to this library in search of the information from all across the world. Philosophy flourished in this time period because of the disappearance of the polis. The polis emphasized the community while the philosophy focused on the individual itself. Three examples of schools of thought are the Stoics, who encouraged intellectual inquiry to provide guidance in moral behavior, the Epicureans, who thought that one should enjoy every moment of life, and lastly the Cynics, which urged the rejection of social norms. Hellenistic religion mostly consisted in adaptation of the Greek god Zeus in terms of the location, such as Egypt and Babylon.